All right, I want to say welcome to everybody who's joining us tonight for Screenagers, the next chapter, panel discussion. We know that 315 people requested a link to be able to watch Screenagers and then to be able to join in our panel tonight. I will expect that some more people will join along the way, but we're very thankful that you've decided to join us and most excited for our panel guest tonight, which I'll introduce to you in a minute. My name is Gary Brooker. I'm the Senior Program Director at Courage for Youth, where I've worked since 2012. I have a passion for social emotional learning, especially our programs work with students in grade 5 and 6 and 7 is most of our programs right now are focused in those areas. And I have 3 daughters, 24, 22, and 19. And so I've had my own ongoing tech learning along the way, and also as one in the digital age right now, still learning myself and how to manage technology and to manage my social media, I guess, work and play and the other things that you do online. So I don't want to take up any more time than that, other than to again welcome you and to tell you that if you're just joining us, we're going to have you keep your cameras off. We're going to have you keep your sound off tonight so our panel can be able to do what they do best. And then if you have questions, we're going to have you type them into the chat box, and my staff, which I will introduce to you immediately, that I get to work with, my awesome team, they will moderate the questions and forward them to me to be able to be asked along the way. I want to introduce you to Tracy Cunningham. Tracy is one of our program directors at Courage for Youth. She is focused on SCREAM, our SCREAM program, social emotional learning and leadership program focused on grades 6 and 7. Tracy, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
And the other gem I get to work with is Chantel Wood. Chantel is also program director at Courage for Youth. Chantel focuses on many projects, but one is our grade 4-5, really a grade 5 program called Voices. Hello, Chantel.
Hello, I'm excited for tonight.
The other thing that these 2 ladies will be doing, other than fielding the questions and forwarding them on, they'll also be making sure the resources that we talk about tonight and that we don't even get to tonight are going to be posted on our Courage for Youth page. So long beyond this, by the way, the meeting is being recorded, which we will post in a couple of days so that those that did not make it here tonight for the panel discussion will be able to see what we did and hear the questions answered and asked. But we'll also have pages and pages of resources, which there are some there already for you and to equip you better as you deal with teens and preteens, but also for your own parenting, your teaching, and if you're a teen here tonight, even for your own wellness as we try to give people more toolboxes for their life. In our panel tonight, I'm really grateful for the people who have said yes to us to join us on this journey in Screenagers Next Chapter. I want to say welcome Scott Stevens. Scott works for Canadian Mental Health Association. He's a social worker with them. And say hello, Scott.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you and great to be here tonight.
Good. Ramona Souza is a teacher and a counselor in School District 23. Ramona brings a vast experience in the district, but also just from both being a parent and being a teacher and counselor, she's going to bring some wisdom to us tonight and maybe some fellow struggles along the way. Hello, Ramona.
Hi, guys.
Also on our panel tonight is Jordan Kleckner. Jordan is the district principal of learning technology with School District 23. And I worked with Jordan when he was VP at one of the schools with our programs, and we worked on a number of other projects together. I was really thankful for him to bring some of the most recent trends in terms of online education, but also the struggles that go along with that tonight. So Jordan, we're really glad you're here as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And our final panelist tonight is Anancha Gownder. Anancha is she works with Foundry in Kelowna. She is a peer support worker, and I've only met her here tonight, but from what I have heard of her already and what she's already said tonight, I think she's going to be a real fun panelist to have. Hi, Anancha.
Hi, I use comedy to help me cope with life, so I'm actually hilarious.
Well, we want to add a little levity tonight, so we're glad you're here. You came highly recommended to our panel tonight, so we're excited. For those of you that have not had the opportunity yet to view all of the Screenager movie, I hope you will get to do that. Your link will end today, I believe, because it went 2nd to the 16th. So if you have not seen it yet, you should go watch the end of it. We're going to focus, we're going to pretend that you've all seen it tonight, but I think whether you've seen it or not, the things we talk about will certainly be helpful in the next 40 minutes or so. One of the things I wanted to ask our panel as they watched it, this is really the 2nd edition of Screenagers. Screenagers, the first one, really drew attention to the fact that we're spending more and more time in front of screens, and it is causing some issues along the way. It comes with a great benefit, but it comes with some dangers and maybe even some pitfalls. And this 2nd chapter, the next chapter in Screenagers, from the director of the movie, and her own personal experience with their daughter, really focuses on some of the side effects of what our teens, preteens, and post-teens are going through in this digital age, and whether it's connected or not, depression and anxiety, and how our tech and tech usage could or could not be playing into that. And so I'm going to ask each of our panelists tonight, what resonated from your personal setting, where you're working right now, your personal experience, the people you're relating to, what resonated from Screenagers, the next chapter with you that would say, you know what, that's exactly what I'm seeing, or you know what, I have some questions about that. I'm going to start with Scott tonight, Scott Stephen from Canadian Mental Health Association. Scott, is there anything that resonated with you from the movie as you watched it that connected?
Yeah, definitely. The most important thing that I found from the documentary was the importance of really validation of the emotions that teens are experiencing. And it's something that's not necessarily indicative of technology overuse, although like technology does put barriers for sure, or definitely can put barriers between communication. But they did a great job in the documentary of really just emphasizing the importance of connections between parents and their children, and really like explaining what that really means in the sense of like being curious about the emotions of teens and just children in general, and like not shaming them for feeling a certain way or not feeling a certain way. I think the interview I really loved was that of the Gottmans, like renowned therapists in the States. That great role play that they did between parents that were like very shaming of a child's experience, like why can't you get over this kind of thing, like what's wrong, versus the second version where the child's met with curiosity by the parents, this like willingness of the parent rather to understand their experience, and how that really just has a stabilizing effect on the child's well-being.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that was one of the things I really noticed too. And the dad that was so vulnerable became so vulnerable with his daughter, and how that allowed her to open up to him, because if you watch their interaction from the first movie, much different.
Yeah, definitely.
And Nacho, I want to go over to you. And in terms of screenager, teenager age, you're probably closest, and you've also have some lived experience with anxiety and depression. So was there anything in the Screenager movie for you that really resonated, connected?
This is gonna sound awful as a way to start, but like as a youth, it was weird. It was weird and it was hard to get into it, but then as a person that is very interested in mental health and like wants to kind of get more into that aspect and get all those different perspectives, it was easier to kind of have that interest in it that way, because I guess as a youth I felt like I was being more talked to sometimes. Like I as I'm just very self-aware because of everything I've been through. So I think this is more of a personal, I guess, personal way of saying how I felt about it, not a generalization. I found it really intriguing and it was really deep and it was really nice to kind of see those parents that were willing to actually support their children like that, and it was really nice. But like there's times when it just kind of felt more like those DVDs when those teachers would put it in just for that free period and you would just sit there and zone in and out of it.
So let's go, because you are a peer support worker, so you deal with fellow teens, or teens, that's your job, right?
Yeah.
So do you see some of the anxiety and depression in the people you're working with? And would you say that some of it or any of it could be connected to the amount of screen time, to social media, to other stressors? What kind of things are you seeing?
Honestly, a huge thing is social media just because there is that influence of like, oh, my body's not like this supermodel, or my body's not like this person, or just my lifestyle isn't like this other person. So there is that huge effect on that mental kind of psyche and just like that way of wanting to live your life. So social media does affect you, and at times it's really hard to navigate away from, I guess, all the luxury side of it, because like for your like special feed, sometimes you'll look at one post and it'll just show you constantly like a bunch of nice Mercedes or Porsches or whatever. And you're like, dang, I want 6 of those.
Gotcha. So the comparison that happens sometimes on social media, and I don't think this is even just for teens. I think those of us that are parents in the room and grown adults, we have the same thing. We have envy of people going on trips, or I do, or of the life they're living. I sometimes most resonate with the person that's really honest and said, I'm having a really bad day. Somebody want to reach out and talk to me. Now, Jordan, I want to hop over to you for a minute, because, we're in an age where not only are we using all sorts of technology more, your job in the district, principal of learning technologies, has obviously during COVID, I can't even imagine what you've had to do to your job description has changed and the things that you've had to do. But one of the things that you must have noticed is, in an age where we might like more balance between what we do online and what we do out in the real world, we're actually asking our teens to spend a lot more time, and adults to work and to connect a lot more online. Is that not true?
Yeah, that's certainly fair to say, and I really appreciate Scott and Ash's points there, because I literally just made myself a few notes, and one of the things that really stood out to me in the second kind of viewing was that we're really seeing how important it is that we're listening to youth around this conversation. We often, as adults and parents, and I can throw myself in that mix, we default to, we of course totally understand and know best. But one thing that stood out to me clearly is, especially in the second one, is that as adults, we clearly don't understand the problem. And often when we don't understand it, we jump to very simple solutions. So one of the things that we've done is spent some of our time doing some work alongside researchers at UBCO. And John Maroney, my vice principal, is in the room, and he's actually done a great job in leading this work. But one thing that we uncovered right away is that there's just this snap judgment, like, hey, tell me the exact amount of screen time I can put my kid on, and then it'll be all solved. So is it 2 hours too? And then there won't be a problem. And one of the things that we've unearthed in our inquiry over the past couple of years is that I think one of the things that we're trying to really do is shift the conversation around this being something that's just for kids to consider. We know that kids aren't the ones texting and driving, it's adults. We know that kids aren't voting in elections and doing so in ways that maybe aren't informed and falling for fake news. Like, we know the crowd that's most likely to spread fake news is actually the 65 and up crowd. And so, when I look at it, it's not a generational thing. It's something that we're all in. And I think what we really struggle around is, as parents and adults, we often know best. And so, one analogy we've always used, it's like we're trying to teach our kids how to ride a bike, but we don't understand how to ride the bike ourselves. And so the reason we often share that is I think the moment we realize it's something that we have to explore ourselves, it means we have to open up and be vulnerable about what's going on there. So really the work we've been doing for the past couple of years has not only been to do a community-wide inquiry to better understand what's going on, how are kids feeling, how are adults feeling, but the other one is that we're trying to make sure that we see that this is about building skills and knowledge and dispositions on how we approach tech. Because a great example is what we're doing right here. It's screen time. This is screen time that we're doing right now. And we all need the skills to be able to do this in our world. And so the answer when COVID came in really slapped us in the face around that. It's this online school that John and I look after. The answer wasn't no online school. We needed online school. And so we worked with our teachers to talk about, well, what does digital wellness look like in the learning that we're designing for our kids? And what's a balanced approach look like? And how do we give our kids the skills to be able to navigate this space? And it's an ongoing journey. I don't think it's an easy one for us to solve. And I think the danger is the moment we start to jump to simple solutions around this stuff, it means we haven't actually done enough work to actually truly understand it. Because it reminds me of just like when you ever hear simple solutions around diets, and everyone in this room would know that, it's not as simple as that. And so, I think that's really the work we've been doing, is trying to start more of a conversation around it, that it's something that we're going to have to work through together through conversation.
Great. Thank you very much. I think it's really fascinating, how COVID has changed what we're doing. I mean, it's just sped up things in so many ways, right? I mean, I can't, if you would have said 2 years ago, or if someone would have said to you, Jordan, this is how many kids will be online schooling in this district during the next 2 years, you probably would have said, what? You're crazy, right?
Yeah,
So,
and the reality is I would also say on the other side is students are using technology and they're learning all the time, whether they're in online school or not. And so are adults. Like I think about every single one of us in this room will get on our device and look up how to do something, YouTube it, whatever. So, we look at the framework that we've developed as a district that we're starting to really make use of. It's a much more wider, broader definition of digital wellness. It's not just about screen time. That's a component of it for sure. But thinking about how do we think critically about what we read and see online? Anesha definitely talked about that one, about what you're looking at and how you perceive it and how you start to internalize or externalize it, but also how you use technology for learning, how you spread positivity. And the other one that's really emerging too is how do you keep yourself safe in this digital environment? And I got to tell you again, I'll even just share this as an example. Our district put out a phishing scam, like a phishing simulation to all our staff, and over 1,000 staff fell for it. And so, and to be honest, like it's funny, a lot of youth will say that's so obvious that's a phishing scam, but we're finding that, we have a lot of learning to do in this space ourselves. So we've done a lot of work with like the district parent advisory council, for example, and various PACs. We ran a digital wellness for families online course. And we use the word families very strategically, because what I liked about this video is you saw the mom and dad very vulnerable about not knowing or getting what to do, but they were open to, like Scott said, to try to figure out how, like, I'm going to try to listen and I got to start with understanding first and try to really hear my child versus jump to a quick solution that I think I'm going to implement because I think this will just stop the problem.
Which is, that whole empathetic response really is how we connect. One of the questions which has already come up, I'll wait for just a second, but I will direct it to Ramona right after she has a chance to give us any connecting points for you, Ramona. Ramona's, again, if you're just joining us, Ramona's School District 23 teacher and counselor, also parent. And the question right now is from the movie Screenagers, the next chapter. Is there anything that sort of stuck with you in there, Ramona?
Yeah. So, thanks, Gary. Yeah, I'm really listening to the other panelists there, and my perspective, I saw really two pieces to this this movie. One was talking about mental health and depression, anxiety, and screen time, and it kind of flipped back and forth, right? I felt that there was a lot going on in this movie, but if it opens for conversation, and I agree with Jordan, there is no simple answer. This is complex. So in my work as a school counselor, I've been a high school, I've taught K-12, being a counselor K to 12, and I've been around a long time. And my colleagues and I, other school counselors and I, have really, before COVID and even, even in, I'd say mid 2000s, saw an increase in anxiety and stress, anxiety, and depression, because we know that unchecked stressors, overwhelming stress, can lead to anxiety, and then unchecked anxiety can progress, right? Not always, but it can progress into more serious things like depression. And we've all seen a rise in it in our offices. So I sit with students every single day that talk about these stressors, and many of them have diagnosed themselves already with anxiety, and many of the students I work with, so the last 10 years I've been at Central, which is an alternate school. So students come in and oftentimes they're on medication and that type of thing. But the question was, why the spike in 2011-ish, 2010, 2011? And when you look at, years, I've been a counselor for years, but there had been a spike. Was it always there, or was there something else going on? And that was the question. So again, we don't have simple answers, but we do have a lot of complex questions. And even as a counselor, when I'm dealing with students in my office and families that are dealing with this, we want to catch it earlier. We want to catch these stressors earlier. And our students are, their cortisol, everything is more, well, we know that with the teenage brain, right? We know what happens with the teenage brain. They feel emotion. Their cortisol is higher than that of adults. So I appreciated in the movie, or in the documentary, that they talked about the brain. And of course, I'm a Lynn Lyons fan. I use a lot of her stuff. We've actually brought her to the district. She spoke, how many years ago was that, Jordan? I can't remember. But Lynn Lyons is, she's excellent. I use a lot of her work, and I use her framework when I look at this, and we say, stress is, I don't want to say normalize it, but we talk about it as a brain thing. And anxiety is, and her 3 E's, right? That was, I like that. Expect, externalize, and experiment. But again, I reiterate what Scott says. When we get parents involved, and sometimes that is a call from me sometimes, or a teacher, when we get parents involved and there's validation and listening, avoiding coming up with a quick solution, when we validate, excuse me, and validate their mess, because it's their mess, that goes a long way with the student, whether they're on screen or not. I think those two things do collide for sure. But, my focus is always on the results of that: anxiety, stress, and depression. So, I think it starts a really good conversation, but this is only the beginning of the conversation. That's kind of the message that I see.
If you're just joining us, if you have a question tonight for our panel, they are coming in. I'm not sure we're going to have time to get to all of them, but we're going to try to group them as much as we can. You can put it in the group chat, or you can direct chat to Tracy Cunningham or Chantel Wood, who work for Courage for Youth with me, and they are fielding the questions and then forwarding them to me. We're going to hop to a couple of those right now, just because they are good ones and they're coming from you. So again, thanks for joining us tonight. We are in the panel discussion of Screenagers Next Chapter. And I also got a note from my staff, my fellow team members, that said your link is actually good until the 18th. So you get 2 more days. If you've not watched the movie, or if you still want to see it again, or you want to show somebody, it's good for 2 showings per household. And if you really want to see it again, we can probably give you another link. But there's a chance to do that until the 18th. A question directly for you, Anancha. This is coming from somebody in the room. What would you recommend to young people in your life that are comparing themselves to others, i.e. a negative way on social media? So when you talk to teens or preteens or your fellow friends that are comparing themselves and struggling with that, what kind of advice do you give to? What do you talk to them about?
So I kind of start with what those thoughts start with, at least like what they're centered around. And then I at least like to start the process with them to look in the mirror once a day, or at least like once or twice a day in the morning, and at least point two things out. It can be literally anything about themselves, their personalities, whatever that day that they find really amazing about themselves, be it their hair, their eyes, their lashes, their eyebrows, literally anything that makes you feel good that day. And then don't look in the mirror again. Don't worry about it. Think about those two things that made you feel really good at the beginning of the day. Keep thinking about those. And then we kind of build on that to start building more so on what you can do to make yourself confident. So it's kind of just a slow building process of my body is mine and it's perfect. It's doing what it can to give me the life I deserve. So it's just kind of slowly, as bad as it sounds, you're just slowly manipulating yourself to love yourself. But in a nice way that you're not putting much pressure. So it's like, if you don't want to look in the mirror that day, don't. You can have a day where you just cover the mirror up. That's
So
more than okay.
are you suggesting what's happening is sometimes, well, not only just young people, but all of us at some point are using the connections of social media like the mirror, only we're seeing something that's much different and we don't therefore like what we see in our own mirror. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, like we will compare ourselves, but you kind of have to just find a thing or two that you really like. And you can always be like, I want to make that a goal for myself when I'm older. Or you can be like, I don't want to be like this when I'm older. It's just kind of a way to maybe set easier goals on yourself and also just kind of learn to idolize your body and your soul rather than others.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Another question, Jordan, it's going to be a little hot button topic coming over to you here.
Let's do that.
I know you can handle this one. In the movie, some schools were having decided a policy of having phones put in lockers or pocket holders in the classroom, just like some people have to now do when they go into meeting rooms. Would this be something SD23 is looking into or talking about?
Yeah, it's funny because here's what I'm doing, multi-screening. I'm texting my vice principal and said, hey, it wouldn't be a conversation around digital wellness if someone didn't bring up, the conversation around banning phones. And I think that I was very strategic in bringing up the start of my thoughts on this movie was, again, simple solutions aren't going to lead to the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that kids need to function around this stuff. We've actually got many teachers in our district that are actually using cell phones in the classroom in meaningful ways in learning and helping kids learn to regulate with them and help. And the reality is you look at all the students that go off to university and they're going to need that same sort of thing where they have their devices. And I'll even take it a step further. One of the things we're finding around a digital wellness conversation is that it's almost impossible in 2021 to learn without technology. And that certainly isn't always with the cell phone, but the reality is I'm sure every adult in this room for the most part actually has one that they use. And so this conversation, if anything, is we're saying that what we're trying to do is actually lean into how do we help kids learn about having the power of this learning device on them at all times, and having a critical thinking approach about what they're reading and seeing. That's why I really appreciate what Anesha was saying about whether it's body image. I mean, those things have always been something in media. It's this technology, it amplifies it, if anything, right? And so a lot of what we're doing in schools that we're trying to work towards is not the concept of, well, if we just put it away and when they turn 16, they'll automatically be able to use these and do it well. We know that's not true. We know they need to actually learn how to develop this knowledge, skills, and dispositions as this is part of their life. So a lot of what we're finding in schools is working with educators to work with their students on co-constructing expectations on using them and to work together through that together. And so lots of early great stuff coming forward where we're seeing some educators making really great use of them and actually trying to come up with those expectations with students about when's the appropriate time to make use of it and when's it not. And so Really, School District 23 is absolutely a personal learning device environment, and we're seeing lots and lots of teachers make great use of that. But that also speaks to some of the work when you ask what are we doing with our learning technology department, is we're spending a lot of time working with schools around professional learning, not just how to use tools like technology in their learning, which is happening everywhere, K to 12, absolutely, and beyond. But this other side as well around how do we help our educators also learn about how they can design learning with their students around digital wellness. Because it's, and what I love is I hope we eventually get to a point where we remove the word digital, because this really is just about wellness. And, you know, the former term used to be, and I'm sure you've all heard it before, digital citizenship is just citizenship. And so, you know, I think that's where we're at the cusp of that churning over. So to be honest, where we're at is that we know we're trying to work with educators around that piece. What you're still finding though is some schools have very different approaches and rules. So it's very where the teachers are comfortable as we get into the space. Because if we're honest, and I like what Ramona said, you know, technology is moving fast. And so, you know, a lot of learning has to happen around that piece. So that's a lot of where we spend a lot of our time and effort, is working with educators around their skill set and using this with students.
I just want to jump in here, just to give an example. We, especially during Mental Health Awareness Week and those kind of things, we have contests in our classrooms to see who can stay off their phones. Or we use the phone in a positive way to send amazing messages, like send, you know, we call love bomb, or send a bunch of positive, like all day, let's just send positive texts or messages to people on our contact list or people that we communicate with. So like, and make it more, more part of their life to see, hey, when I put my phone here for, let's say, an hour, 2 hours, my head clears a little bit and I get I get into my own thoughts. That's kind of cool too. So to take those breaks and to do that, you know, sometimes it has to be in a game or in a, you know, in a fun way, but those kind of things are important. Now we're middle and high school, so.
Yeah, and Ramona, if you don't mind, I'll kind of play off that. It reminds me of the diet analogy. We all know that fasting and you know, going cold turkey on stuff, and then a lot of people will then rebound. And so what we really want is a healthy eating regimen over time around how we have these devices sitting next to us, but they're not ruling our world, right? And so that takes a lot of practice, a lot of knowledge, skills, and disposition work. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to do is in education, is we're trying to prepare kids for what we call the real world. And, you know, you look at every student that goes off to post-secondary university, and they are bringing a laptop to everywhere they go. When we actually stand the university students, we're like, talk to me about what you use technology for. And they kind of chuckled and said, everything. I use it for classwork. I use it to book the study room. I use it to find a date. I use it to, you know, and they kind of went through, I use it to call my mom. I use it. And so we know that that's the reality, is it's a huge part of their world. So what we're really trying to do is lean into preparing them to be able to be a part of that world in a way where they can function and live really well. And so the tagline we often use, that what we're striving for, is teaching kids, families, adults, everybody to live well in a digital world, because that's what the world is we are in right now.
You know, that it reminds me, Jordan, just you triggered a couple things for me, but there's also a time, like even around my own dinner table with my girls, where we make a conscious decision where we're not going to keep them on our person. You know, we're going to put them aside for supper hour. Ramona, you know, that time where the only connection I am going to have is going to be with you face to face right here, because I'm as guilty as anybody. If I have that device there, I don't always manage it well. So one of my ways that we try to do that is to put them aside for a minute. Or I've been in 2 meetings at 2 different workplaces lately where they've actually asked us for a half hour, basically during a presentation, to put our devices away so that the total focus was on there. It was foreign. It was foreign to so many people in the room. So I think that balance of, you know, of teaching when it's appropriate. Is there a time to put them away? Is there a time to be disconnected? Does it allow us to focus better? It fits into that whole notion. I love just wellness in general, which I want to come back to you, Scott, for a minute. In your work with Canadian Mental Health, I think one of the questions that came up here in the group, which I want to ask you about, is how do we help parents? How do we help parents that are trying to do the best job they can, and they see maybe some signs in their kids that are struggling with depression or anxiety? When do they know when this is just normal angst and a little bit of good tension versus I got some real concerns about what I'm seeing in my child?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I like the answer that was given in the documentary. Actually, I think it was by one of the physicians or even the psychiatrist, that it's really a matter of like time and severity. We all have, things that provoke fear or sadness or low mood in our day-to-day from time to time. And it's a matter of like, if that's going on for like 2 weeks or more, and it's really having a serious effect, like fear or low mood, sense of withdrawal, that it's perhaps, cause for concern. And by cause for concern, I really just mean like, to really get a second opinion, perhaps go to the doctor kind of thing, or just like reach out to a counselor, and really kind of just get it off your chest kind of thing. But yeah, it's, in my mind, and like from what the research says too, it's a matter of severity and time at the end of the day. And that fear and sadness are normal emotions. We experience them as a species. So it becomes a question of like, how do we learn to cope with them? And I think in the documentary rather, the girl who's being documented by her mom says that when she feels anxious, she goes to her phone. So that's a form of escape, or avoidance from doing something. So instead of like, avoiding or escaping uncomfortable emotions, it becomes in a question of, how do we acknowledge, how do we observe and describe these emotions? And once we can do that, how do we cope with them?
Really good point.
So it's really like kind of echoing what Jordan said there. These are really just human issues now on a digital form. Like we all have to communicate with one another in an effective way. And granted that there's a lot more information being given to us by virtue of social media and digital platforms, but at its essence, we are just trying to communicate with one another, and we're all trying to be validated in our own ways. So if we can acknowledge the emotions that we're feeling and learn tools to cope with them, then I think that's literally our best way forward. And the research will show too that addressing emotions diminishes their intensity.
Awesome. That whole piece of emotional and mental wellness, and how empathy plays into that is so much bigger than this discussion about social media. We have, I think that the pieces that still resonate with me from this movie is some of the most powerful stuff we do in the classroom with Courage for Youth, is when kids stop long enough to actually feel what somebody else is feeling, or to at least listen long enough to try to sense what it would be like to be that person, and to have some understanding around that. And I heard that's what you were saying, Anantha, when you were talking about rather than being talked down to, is to actually take time to listen long enough to know what it would feel like. And I think that those were some of the most powerful messages from the movie for me. Couple of questions from the group, and I'm going to leave this open to the floor. This should be anybody that wants to answer this on the panel can certainly answer this. What age, they'll sort of be back to back here because they are connected. What age do you think is appropriate for introducing a cell phone or smartphone to a child, teenager, and what are the best parameters when introducing it? Anybody have? Let's go to Ramona. Ramona, you're parent and teacher. You got double role here. What do you think?
Well, I don't know if our generation of parents were the first to experiment a little bit. And I know that my son is still mad that he was the last one to get a cell phone in his school. But I don't know. That one is a hard one, other than I say that because in the home, students like 1 and 2 years of age are using iPads and grabbing their mom's phone while she's on the phone, you know, she's so I mean that I think it's a kind of a bit of a bit sort of a not authentic when we come up with an age. I think it's all about as parents, when we're introducing technology into the home, we're teaching along the way. So, you know, I kind of stay away from age because like we know there's really mature 15-year-olds and really immature 15-year-olds. I think it's about watching the response of your kid and knowing your kid and noticing, is this impacting their mental health? Are they getting too wrapped up in it? Do they have the brain function or developmental state, you know, maturity to be able to, you know, use it appropriately? And that's the hard teaching, and it's role modeling it too. That's the other piece. It's about, you know, and learning together. I think Jordan said that too. It's about learning together. And I think in our house, we were learning together because it was really that time, right? In the digital world, I guess. So it is about teaching along the way, admitting when you're wrong, apologizing to your kids when you mess up. It's all those parenting things that have always stood the test of time. They're powerful, but it's about knowing, spending the time, listening, knowing your kid and listening.
Jordan, over to you for a minute, because I think it connects a little bit. Your dad, yes?
Yep. And yep,
How old are you?
I'm
How
on
old-
the other end with what Ramona said. I got a almost 3-year-old, and yeah, wants to touch the iPad. And I've even shared before with others, you know, I'm mucking through this work the same way. Like she wanted to play with the iPad, different things like that. And we've had to try to come up with what does that balance look like. And what I appreciate about the age conversation is Ramona's spot on. It's not like you hit like a certain age and then immediately on your 10th birthday, you're able to do certain things. And it is very individual specific. But I would actually say that my worry about sometimes when the age question comes up is it almost feels like a pivot point. Whereas one of the best ways to approach this is gradually learn together, and that gradual release model that we have with our kids around a lot of things, right? Like the first time we let our kid cross the street without holding our hand, you know, you take your time, show them, talk them through how to do it, and eventually you're doing that. And so that's why we always use that riding that bike analogy. But I will also say 2 important things. Like I know one of the resources we shared actually references an article through the New York Times that actually talked a lot about how your parenting approach can change around digital as the kids hit different kind of age ranges. And, you know, and again, it's not a perfect science. It's literally at these ages, you know, a good example around, you know, younger than 2, it's saying like, you know, really you should be doing a lot of interacting with them. But then eventually there is a point of introduction, and they talk a lot about some best practices around parenting with that. And I would say that, you know, as you make your way through those age ranges, you can start to think, what's the best approach for my child? And some of the things I love seeing that people do is pick on social media. Is families, a parent might make a family social media account so they can be present when they're looking at family or social media posts together, talking them through together when they're young, instead of when they're 12, they just hand it over. Because we actually know from a lot of the research that the average age that a student gets a cell phone now is 11. And so that's the average. And then the next average age after that is 10 actually. So it's actually trending towards younger. And so, you know, we know that these devices are there, but we also know at the same time that even as adults, well, we make plans using our technology now. We don't meet at the lockers and do that anymore. So we also know there's a component of that, but that's why I like what Ramona's saying about it's not as like there's a perfect age for any part of these things, but there is some certain thoughts you can give to where's my where's my child at in their development around what their next adjacent step would be. And then thinking, how would I actually support them in that, and not, I'm going to wait till their, you know, 12th birthday and then I'm going to hand a cell phone over and then hopefully they do okay.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, as our facilitation in the classrooms with literally thousands of kids at that age group, the scariest thing for me is that's exactly what so many parents are doing. We're not very proficient at it ourselves, but we've held off. Okay, well, when they hit grade 6 or they hit grade 5, or maybe when they get to be 14, we'll give them their smartphone on their own. But then it's just a handing over. It's like giving your kid the car keys and say, go ahead, you're going to be okay now. and when we ask these kids, this is a scarier part, at grade 5 and 6, well over 50% have their own devices by then in the schools that we deal with. And over half of those kids, their parents have no idea where they go and what they do. Like, there's no discussion. It's almost like if we don't look at it, it's not a problem. But we've not really talked about our own struggles and how, how within a second you can be in a site that's not really appropriate. And what do you do when you get there? Or the piece of putting them on a charger at night, because if we leave them in our room, all those discussions that, could be happening, which, by the way, everybody that's sort of tuning in here, your questions are coming in fast and furious now. One of the great things that we're talking about tonight, all the resources that we're going to reference and that we didn't even get to reference are going to be on the Courage for Youth site. Under resources, you're going to get to have some parenting help, some teaching help, some discussion starters with your kids, some mental health and wellness type exercises and resources for you, because this is an ongoing discussion. We're not going to even pretend that we're going to cover this all in the less than an hour that we have. Our main goal tonight, I will tell you, is to get people talking about this. What does wellness look like? It's not just about this digital piece. It's what does wellness look like in general? And how do we foster those kind of discussions, those empathy type discussions? That was a discussion that came in, and I'm gonna go back over to you, Anantya. If a parent has never had a discussion with their child about technology, but they already have a cell phone and they're concerned about where they're going, the amount of time that they're on there, or maybe that there might be even a connection between the comparison and depression and anxiety being caused by that. How does a parent, do you think, start that discussion? Like, what would you want, or do you think that the teens would want from their parents without being talked down to, but to have a discussion about it?
I think the best way to go about it is like not come at your child or youth with an accusatory tone. Just because I feel like a lot of the times when my parents were even coming up to me to ask questions, it wasn't more so of a question, they were more so accusing me of doing a wrong thing when it wasn't actually me. So it's kind of more so setting the tone to be a more open and welcoming environment. So it's kind of so your child feels that they can actually come and talk to you whenever. Having that tone set from the get-go will make it a lot easier to actually talk to your youth about internet safety. You just making sure that they feel like they can actually come up to you and be like, hey, I did this, and they won't get yelled at. That's really all a child wants.
Which is exactly, when they went to the brain research in the part of there where if you come at them, any of us, it's going to be fight or flight right away, rather than empathy. If you get an empathetic response or a listening response, where the parent becomes part of your team, on your team, and an encourager, it goes to a different part of the brain entirely. Parenting with Love and Logic is a course that we teach through Courage for Youth, and that whole part of teaching parents not to get angry, even if you are upset, it's how do you take time to actually listen and empathize and say, yes, that must feel horrible. And that was the dad in the movie that really struck me again, when he sat down long enough to have that, when he started to be less judgmental, is what I hear you saying, and just more a listener.
I think also practicing, no matter how old you are, practicing mindfulness with all your emotions, that's going to help you a lot, because the minute you start getting angry, you can actually just step back and be like, why am I getting angry? Is it because I'm worried about their future? Is it because I'm scared for what could happen? So that you start rationalizing these instead of just lashing out and kind of breaking that trust and bond that you could have with your child. It only takes one incident to make it so that your child doesn't feel safe to tell you anything anymore. It's very easy to break that, but it's very difficult to bring it back up to where it was. So it's kind of just being very mindful of your emotions and what you're going through personally, and that in itself can definitely help the relationship within the family.
Thank you. And that, that really resonates with what you said, Ramona, in terms of, and when we do get angry or we do overreact, apologizing for that, owning our own part of that, and maybe even expressing why we were so reactionary, because we were fearful and we wanted the best for them, which really connects to this next question in a little bit here. And I'm going to go to you, Ramona. We're conditioned to want happiness so much of the time. And this person says, I liked how the documentary spoke to how our best moments happen when we are challenged. How do we teach our children to stay in the hard stuff rather than just looking for an escape into their phones or elsewhere? We need stress, and it has been given a bad name. How do we teach youth and adults really to accept and live through the hard stuff to build resiliency?
Yeah, resiliency. That's a really important skill. And I think that I think this question is excellent because I think even Scott said too that life is stressful and we need to be able to sit in the mess. And sometimes we just get on the ground and sit in the mess with our kid and sit in the mess without trying to find a solution. And that is probably the hardest thing. We know it's the right thing as a parent to do that, but it is so hard. I think, we're all talking about how to do that. And that means grounding yourself, right? As a parent, to ground yourself. And like you said, asking yourself, where is this reaction coming from? Because we know as much as we deny it sometimes, we parent a lot alike. Our go-to is often how we were parented. And so we really do have to keep ourselves in check and our own stress in check. And depending on the age of the child, you can certainly share. And the students that tell me about, their parents sharing things with them, like age appropriate, obviously, it really does put you on the same team, right? You come alongside them. And that, I've done a lot of work with suicide protocol and suicide ideation and suicidal ideation. And sometimes it's just one adult in your corner can make the difference. One adult to come alongside you. And so that they're not going online to find that adult, that's face to face, right? So resilience comes from, again, having stress and being able to walk through and say, hey, I came out. I did okay during that. It wasn't fun, but I sat in the mess for a while, and guess what? That it didn't kill me. And I think, again, I go back to Lynn Lyons. She normalizes stress. It's normal to feel this way. And I think something was said, there was a line that was said, an example a parent can say is, wow, that sounds really hard. A simple comment like that can really open up dialogue. And that dialogue builds resilience.
Yeah, I think that's super, super important, that really, parents are the most influential teachers that children will ever have in their entire lives. Like, it's literally the foundation for so many parts of their personality. And really, like, when it comes down to like kind of like what can teens do to help cope with stress, again, like depending on the age, like the closer you get to 18, the more independent they become, obviously. But even at say 18, if a parent can model ways to cope with stress, like observing and describing stress, that has the effect of vicariously teaching that skill to their children. Or even like, research has shown too that by virtue of parents asking their children, what's going on with you now, it has this effect of the child having to think about their own thinking. It's called mentalization. And it's super, super important. And the more mentalization that someone builds, and this is, a broad stroke for any human, but the more mentalization capacity they build, the more it regulates their emotions, because it has a stabilizing effect of, oh, okay, like I understand what's going on in my body.
Yeah.
And as parents, how to do that kind of thing, you know, first has to start with, you know, what's going on with yourself, observing and describing what's going on with yourself. And as Anantha said, like also like creating that safer space of like, once you have an understanding of what's going on with yourself, then you have a better idea of like, okay, how can I respond appropriately given what I know about myself? And that whole gamut of creating that environment for yourself will then vicariously get transferred over to your child that way.
You know, having said that, there are some good apps too. There
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
I have some on the, I put some on the resources there that can, you know, if a parent isn't there, that, you know, some students that's a good start.
Yeah, definitely. The apps are really quite good for kind of like a mindfulness practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and one thing I'll throw out there, and I'm always appreciative. I've known Ramona for a while, and she's certainly has that correct approach, no doubt, with her children. But that trying to come alongside and you know, be empathetic is really important. And I'd also say the one thing I'd add to that too is that often we have these conversations when there's a problem, and it's reactionary, right? And so I'd say that this goes back to where all the work we're really trying to engage in is very proactive. Is very, can we start to have conversations about critically thinking about what you're reading online around, say, body image, around that, like not saying it won't happen at the same time, but we all know that we don't deal well with anything when we're heightened. And so when we are in a reactionary state, so I think it takes incredible resilience on the part of a parent to be in a reactionary time, but try to approach it knowing this is a really good opportunity for learning at the same time, not just for your child, but for yourself too. And so I like Ramona's just sitting in the mess thing going, I'm not coming with the answer. I'm not coming just to solve it. So I feel like a mix of that also with that proactive side of it's really important to be having lots of these conversations. And Gary, you and I have worked around this stuff through Courage for Youth quite a bit, and how important that is to do it, not when it's happening. I mean, I think when I was growing up, my parents were talking to me about dating before I was dating, right? You know, like, and then when they were still talking me through it. And then every once in a while, yeah, we had some reactionary conversations, but it was littered with a whole bunch of proactive ones in between, which also helped quite a bit to make it so that it wasn't like they just flew in when there was a problem and they had no understanding of what was going on. So I think that's also a thing to put out there, is that there needs to be, certainly from our vantage point, a lot done around proactive that's going to pay dividends in the long run.
Yeah, like these are all skills for sure. And just like any skill, as you mentioned, Jordan, like we learn better when we're not in a heightened emotional state, and when it's practiced on a continual basis.
Yeah, I think, you know, that's one of the reasons we do what we do at Courage for Youth, is we try to give as many tools to kids at a very young age to be able to navigate the world in which they're living in. No parent can be with their kids 24/7. No teacher can be with their kids 24/7. So we always ask, who's the biggest determining factor in what your life is going to look like? It's you. And you get to make a lot of decisions every day, starting at a very young age. And what are you going to base those decisions on? What is important to you? We talk about, the values, those beliefs that they start telling themselves at an early age, or don't, that's really important to them. And sometimes it's reactionary against their parents. Sometimes it's exactly in line with them, but they still get to decide. And so then what's the connecting point then? Then we start to give them some tools, obviously, around empathy pieces, and around, we do give them guidelines for using their social media, with some boundaries. Because again, I think we all at a certain age, we need boundaries. We need some boundaries that doesn't say it's bad, don't use it, but what's the appropriate ways to use it? And I love, Jordan, that, one of the things that you guys have been really mindful of is when those devices, and helping teachers, when you have those devices, you got two choices. You can be on task with what we're doing, or you can be off doing something else. That's the same with me in a board meeting. Same with me with my business associates. I can use it to escape somewhere, or I can use it to actually, be part of what's supposed to be going on. You guys, we said we're going to be under an hour tonight. We are just over an hour. I want to say thank you. There's some questions that are unanswered, but I know that we have some resources that we've posted on our page on courageforyouth.com that will come in from all of our panelists, which I love. So we have some resources. If they're not up there right now, they will be within an hour to two tonight. And certainly if you look back there tomorrow, those resources will be there. I know that our panel will be okay with personal contact. I'm going to ask that if that's okay. If some parent has a specific question, emails are easily accessible. We'll add those emails to our resource list as well. Jordan, one of the questions that came up a couple times now of how can PACs, what are some good resources for PACs around digital wellness, rather than just saying no and having the pressure put on a principal to put all the phones away. How can we have this discussion with parents at a broader scale in the PAC? I mean, we know 315 people watched the link. We had at one point, I think we're up close to 30 parents in the room, and we'll make this recording live. So hopefully you can refer it to other people as well, because I think the discussion is really important, but this is only scratching the surface. And I want to say thank you to each one of our panelists tonight, to Scott and to Nacho, to Ramona and to Jordan for taking time out of their schedule to be here and answer some questions. I want to thank all the other people in the room, whether you're a parent or a teacher or a grandparent, or maybe all of those things, maybe a teen or two in the room, for joining in this discussion tonight. And we always want to engage in a discussion that brings us closer to more wellness, not just digital wellness, wellness overall. Love that, Jordan. So again, thanks for joining us. If you have not seen the movie, you have until the 18th to use that link, or you have 2 viewings for your house. If you need another link, just click on the link there on Screenagers on courageforyouth.com. And again, all the other contacts are going to be there. The resources are going to be there. And I want to say thank you to everybody again for joining in this important discussion. Look for more opportunities to do this in the future. Thanks again.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everybody.